My name is Emily Carson, and I'm 36 years old. If someone asked me if I ever had dreams of a big family, I'd say yes. Growing up as an only child with busy parents, I always imagined my future home filled with laughter, children running through the halls, and big Sunday dinners where everyone talked over each other. But life has a way of rewriting our stories when we least expect it. After graduating with my degree in library science, I moved to a small city in Colorado and landed a job at the public library. The work wasn't exciting by most people's standards, but I loved being surrounded by books and helping people find exactly what they needed, even when they couldn't quite explain what that was. I met James at a community fundraiser for the library. He was tall, with kind brown eyes and a shy smile, there representing his accounting firm which had donated money for new children's books. While arranging a display of thank you cards from local kids, I knocked over a stack of books that tumbled like dominoes across the table. James rushed over and helped me gather them, making a joke about how accountants were usually the ones causing things to fall rather than picking them up. That small moment of kindness and humor sparked something between us. We started dating a week later. James was thoughtful and gentle, always listening when I talked about my dream of one day running my own bookshop cafe where people could build community around stories and good food. After 2 years of dating, we got married in a simple ceremony at his parents' lakeside cabin. We bought a charming old Victorian house with more bedrooms than we needed, room to grow into, we both said at the time. I kept working at the library while James's career at the accounting firm flourished. We tried for a baby right away. Month after month, we hoped, and month after month, disappointment followed. After a year, we consulted doctors who ran countless tests, only to give us that heartbreaking label, unexplained infertility. There was nothing specifically wrong, they said, but sometimes bodies just don't cooperate the way we want them to. We have options, James assured me as we sat on our porch swing one evening, my head on his shoulder. Fertility treatments, adoption, surrogacy. Our family doesn't have to look the way we originally pictured it. I nodded, grateful for his support, but the ache remained. Every baby shower invitation, every pregnancy announcement on social media, felt like a small wound reopening. As the years passed, we channeled our nurturing energy into other things. I started a popular children's reading program at the library. James mentored accounting interns. We fostered rescue dogs until they found their forever homes. Our life was good, if different from what we'd planned. We had each other and a strong community of friends. James's younger brother, Michael, lived about an hour away with his wife, Kate, and their 8-year-old son, Lucas. Michael worked as a pilot for a commercial airline, which meant he was often away for days at a time. Kate had given up her career as a teacher when Lucas was born to be a stay-at-home mom. Whenever they visited, I couldn't help but notice how Lucas would gravitate toward our bookshelves, pulling out volumes and asking me questions about the stories inside. He was a curious, thoughtful boy with the same kind brown eyes as his father and uncle. I treasured those moments showing him my favorite childhood books, seeing his imagination light up with possibilities. "He adores you," Kate once told me with a smile. He talks about Aunt Emily's book magic for days after we visit. Those words were both sweet and painful, a glimpse of what might have been if our own dreams of parenthood had come true. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a cold Tuesday evening in February. I was preparing dinner while James worked late finishing tax preparations for a major client. When my phone rang and I saw Michael's name, I answered cheerfully, expecting the usual friendly catch-up. Instead, his voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. "Emily, I need your help. Kate and we're getting a divorce." I set down the knife I was using to chop vegetables and leaned against the counter. "Michael, I'm so sorry. What happened?" He sighed heavily. "It's been building for a while. The time apart with my flying schedule. Disagreements about parenting. We've been trying to make it work for Lucas's sake, but it's just gotten worse. Is there anything James and I can do?" I asked, my heart aching for their family. Michael hesitated. Actually, yes. That's why I'm calling. Kate's moving back to California to be near her parents. She wants Lucas with her, but I'm fighting for joint custody. The problem is my flying schedule. I began to understand where this was heading. I can't be a reliable parent when I'm gone 4 to 5 days at a time, Michael continued. But if Lucas had somewhere stable to stay during my work weeks, a judge would be more likely to grant the joint custody. You want Lucas to stay with us when you're flying, I said softly. I know it's a huge ask, Michael rushed to say, but it would only be temporary until I can arrange a transfer to ground operations or find another solution. Maybe 6 months at most. You and James have that big house. You're great with Lucas, and he loves you both. My mind was already rearranging. Our spare bedroom, thinking about which elementary school was in our district, how to adjust my work schedule at the library. Let me talk to James, I said, but I think you know what our answer will be. When James came home that night, I told him about Michael's call. His face softened with concern for his brother, but I also caught a flicker of something else in his eyes. Apprehension, perhaps. 6 months is a long time, Emily, he said carefully. Having an 8-year-old here will change everything about our routine. I know, I acknowledged, but he's family, and Michael needs our help. James was quiet for a moment, then asked, Is this about helping Michael? Or is it about finally having a child in this house? The question stung with its accuracy. Can it be both? I replied honestly. Yes, I think having Lucas here will fill something that's been missing. But that doesn't make helping Michael any less important. James nodded slowly. You're right. Of course we'll help. I just want to make sure we're both clear about our motivations and expectations. 2 weeks later, Lucas arrived at our doorstep with a small suitcase and his favorite stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. Michael stood behind him, looking exhausted and grateful. Remember, buddy, you'll be staying with Uncle James and Aunt Emily when Daddy has to fly, Michael explained, kneeling to eye level with his son. And when I'm not flying, you'll be at my new apartment. We're going to make this work, okay? Lucas nodded solemnly. At 8, he seemed to understand more than a child should have to about adult problems like divorce and custody arrangements. I made space on the bookshelf in your room for your books, I told him gently. And we can go to the library tomorrow to get some new ones if you'd like. His face brightened a little at that. Can we get books about space? I'm doing a project about Mars. Absolutely, I promised. I know just the ones you'll love. The first few weeks were a significant adjustment for all of us. Lucas was quiet and followed our household rules almost too perfectly, as if afraid that causing any trouble might mean another disruption in his life. James seemed unsure how to connect with him, offering awkward high fives and asking generic questions about school. I did my best to create routines that would help Lucas feel secure. Consistent meal times, a bedtime ritual of reading, together, weekend pancake breakfasts. Gradually, his shell began to crack. He started asking more questions, leaving his toys in the living room, arguing about bedtime. Normal kid behavior that strangely felt like progress. One evening about a month after Lucas came to stay with us, I was helping him with homework at the kitchen table when he suddenly asked, Aunt Emily, why don't you and Uncle James have kids? The question caught me off guard, and I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Well, I said carefully, we wanted children very much, but sometimes bodies don't work the way we hope they will. Uncle James and I weren't able to have a baby, even though we tried for a long time. Lucas considered this with the straightforward logic of a child. That's sad. You'd be a really good mom. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, Lucas. That means a lot to me. Maybe you could adopt a kid like in the books we read, he suggested. Or maybe I could just stay here forever. I smiled and gently smoothed his hair. We love having you here. But your dad and mom love you very much. Even though they're not together anymore, they both want to be part of your life." Lucas nodded, returning to his math worksheet. But his words stayed with me, stirring up feelings and questions I thought I'd put to rest years ago. That night, I mentioned the conversation to James as we got ready for bed. He asked why we don't have children, I said, sitting on the edge of our bed. It made me wonder if we gave up too easily on the idea of adoption. James paused while folding laundry. "We didn't give up easily, Emily. We spent 3 years trying to have a baby, then another year researching adoption before deciding it wasn't right for us. But that was 5 years ago," I pressed. "Maybe things are different now. Maybe we're different." James sat beside me with a sigh. "Having Lucas here has reopened all this for you, hasn't it?" I couldn't deny it. The sound of a child's footsteps in our hallway, small shoes by the door, children's books actually being read instead of just displayed. It felt right in a way I couldn't explain. "I love him," I admitted. "Not just as my nephew, but as this wonderful person who's now part of our daily lives. And yes, it makes me wonder what we might be missing." James took my hand, his expression troubled. "I see that. But Emily, we need to be careful here. Lucas isn't our child. He's going through enough confusion with the divorce. We can't project our unresolved feelings onto his situation." His words made sense, but they also hurt. Was that what I was doing? Using Lucas to fill a void? "I just want him to feel safe and loved while he's with us," I said finally. "Whatever that means for our future, we can figure out later." James nodded and pulled me into a hug. "That's what matters most right now." As weeks turned into months, Lucas began to flourish in our care. His grades improved, he joined the science club at his new school, and he even made a few friends in the neighborhood. Michael visited whenever he wasn't flying, taking Lucas to baseball games and movies, making a visible effort to stay connected despite the challenging circumstances. James, too, seemed to be warming to our new arrangement. I often found him and Lucas in the backyard tossing a football or working on model airplanes together. The awkwardness between them had been replaced by inside jokes and easy conversation. One Saturday morning in May, about 4 months into our arrangement, I was searching through our home office for some tax documents James needed when I came across a worn manila envelope tucked behind some books on the shelf. Curious, I opened it and found a stack of letters bound together with a rubber band. The top letter was addressed to James in handwriting I didn't recognize. I hesitated, not wanting to invade his privacy, but something compelled me to look further. I slipped out the first letter and began to read. "Dear James," it began. "I've thought about how to write this letter 100 times, and there's no easy way to say it. I'm pregnant, and the baby is yours. I know we agreed our time together was just temporary while Michael was deployed overseas, but this changes everything." My hands began to shake as I continued reading. The letter was from Kate, Michael's wife, Lucas's mother, dated 9 years ago. The remaining letters documented a secret correspondence between them, discussing what to do about the pregnancy, their guilt about betraying Michael, and ultimately, their decision that James would step back completely, and Michael would raise the child as his own. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath me. Lucas was James's biological son. My husband had a child, the child we had desperately wanted, and he had kept this from me for 9 years. I don't know how long I sat there on the office floor, letters scattered around me, when I heard the door open. James stood in the doorway, his face draining of color when he saw what I had found. "Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I can explain." I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face. "Explain what? That you had an affair with your brother's wife? That you have a son you never told me about? That you watched me grieve month after month, year after year, over not being able to have children when you had a child all along? It wasn't like that," James said desperately. coming into the room and closing the door, so Lucas, who was watching TV downstairs, wouldn't hear. Michael was deployed in Afghanistan. Kate was lonely. I was helping her with things around the house, and it just happened. Once, Emily. Just once. And you never thought to tell me? I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. All those years of fertility treatments, all those conversations about adoption, you let me believe we would never have a family. I couldn't tell you, James pleaded. Michael and Kate decided to stay together and raise Lucas as their son. I promised to stay out of it, to never interfere. Telling you would have put that at risk. So you lied to me instead, I said, the betrayal cutting deeper with each passing moment. Every time we visited them, every time Lucas called you Uncle James, you pretended. How could you look me in the eye all these years? James sank to his knees beside me. I thought I was protecting everyone, Michael, Kate, Lucas, even you. I didn't want to hurt you with something that couldn't be changed. That wasn't your decision to make, I said coldly. You robbed me of the truth and the right to make my own choices about it. What would you have done? He asked softly. If I had told you 9 years ago that I had fathered a child with my brother's wife, what would you have done? The question hung in the air between us. I honestly didn't know the answer. Would I have demanded that James claim his child? Would I have exposed the affair to Michael? Would our marriage have survived? Before I could formulate a response, we heard small footsteps on the stairs and Lucas's voice calling, Aunt Emily? Uncle James? Can we have lunch soon? I'm hungry. Reality came crashing back. Lucas, James's son, my nephew by marriage but not by blood, was waiting downstairs, innocent in all of this mess we adults had created. We'll be down in a minute. Lucas, I called back, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. James looked at me pleadingly. Emily, please. We need to talk about this more, but not with Lucas in the house. He doesn't know. Nobody knows except Kate and me. Michael doesn't know, I asked incredulously. James shook his head. Kate decided not to tell him. She was afraid it would destroy their marriage. Well, it seems their marriage was destroyed anyway, I said bitterly. And now ours might be too. Gathered the letters, put them back in the envelope, and stood up. I'll make Lucas lunch. I won't say anything to him. But this conversation isn't over, James. Not by a long shot. The next few days were excruciating. James and I maintained a facade of normalcy around Lucas while barely speaking to each other when we were alone. I moved into the guest bedroom, telling Lucas I had a cold and didn't want to make Uncle James sick. Every time I looked at the boy, I saw the resemblance to James that I had somehow missed before. The shape of his ears, the crinkle around his eyes when he smiled, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. On Wednesday evening, Michael came to pick up Lucas for his days off. As I watched them interact, my heart ached with the knowledge I now possessed. Michael loved Lucas with his whole heart, had raised him from birth, was fighting to keep him in his life, and had no idea he wasn't the boy's biological father. After they left, the house felt eerily quiet. James sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face haggard from lack of sleep. What do we do now? He asked simply. I'd been asking myself the same question for days. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell Michael everything. He deserves to know the truth. And what would that accomplish? James countered. Besides devastating him and confusing Lucas? Michael is Lucas's father in every way that matters. Biology is just genetics. It's not just about biology, I argued. It's about honesty. It's about the fact that you kept this from me for our entire marriage. How can I ever trust you again? James looked down at his hands. I made a terrible mistake 9 years ago. Then, I made another one by not telling you. I can't change that now. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness and try to find a way forward that causes the least pain for everyone involved, especially Lucas. And what happens 6 weeks from now when this custody arrangement is over? I asked. Lucas goes back to splitting time between Michael and Kate, and we just go back to our childless life, pretending none of this ever happened? Now that I know Lucas is your biological son? What are you suggesting? James asked cautiously. I hadn't allowed myself to fully form the thought until that moment. Maybe we should tell the truth. All of it. And maybe we should seek custody of Lucas ourselves. James stared at me in shock. You can't be serious. That would destroy my relationship with Michael forever. It would upend Lucas's entire understanding of who he is. And keeping this secret hasn't damaged anything? I challenged. Kate and Michael's marriage still failed. Lucas is still being shuttled between homes. The only difference is that all of it is happening on a foundation of lies. Emily, James said gently, I know you're hurt and angry with me right now. You have every right to be. But please don't let those feelings push you into doing something that could hurt Lucas. His words stung because there was truth in them. Was I really thinking about what was best for Lucas? Or was I seeing an opportunity to finally have the child I'd always wanted? I need some time, I said finally. I need to think about all of this away from you. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my childhood home 2 hours away. My parents had sold the house years ago, but the small lake nearby had always been my thinking place. I sat on a weathered bench overlooking the water, watching ducks float peacefully across the surface while my mind churned with much stormier thoughts. The betrayal felt overwhelming, not just James's affair, but the years of deception that followed. How could our marriage survive this? And yet, when I thought about Lucas, my heart softened. He wasn't innocent in all of this. Whatever happened next needed to prioritize his well-being above all else. I was so deep in thought that I didn't notice someone approaching until they spoke. I thought I might find you here, said a familiar voice. I turned to see Kate standing a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself against the spring breeze. James called me, she explained, sitting beside me on the bench. He told me you found the letters. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, without all my anger and hurt spilling out. I've imagined this day for 9 years, Kate continued quietly, wondering when the truth would finally come out and what it would do to all of us. Did you ever plan to tell anyone? I asked. Kate shook her head. I thought the secret would die with me. But then the divorce happened, and Lucas started spending time in your home. I should have known it was only a matter of time. Does Michael know? No, Kate said firmly. And I don't want him to know. Ever. It would devastate him, Emily. He loves that boy more than his own life. I turned to look at her directly. Why did you come here today? To convince me to keep quiet? Partly, she admitted, but also because you deserve answers that James might not be able to give you. I know what it's like to live with this kind of secret, to have it eating away at you from the inside. I thought maybe talking to me might help. Help how? I asked bitterly. Nothing can change what happened. No, Kate agreed, but understanding might make it easier to decide what happens next. For the next hour, Kate filled in the blanks of the story. How lonely and afraid she had been during Michael's long deployment to Afghanistan. How James had been a steady presence, helping with household repairs and keeping her company during the endless waiting. How one night, after receiving news that Michael's unit had been in a firefight, comfort had turned to something more. We both regretted it immediately, Kate said, her voice hollow with old guilt. We promised each other it would never happen again, and it didn't. But then I found out I was pregnant. And you decided to lie to Michael, I said, trying to keep the judgment out of my voice. Kate's eyes flashed. I decided to protect my marriage and give my child a stable home. Michael, Came back from Afghanistan a different person. Quieter, more distant. The deployment changed him. I was afraid if I told him the truth, he'd leave us both. But he left anyway, I pointed out. Or you left him. Yes, Kate acknowledged sadly. But that was 9 years later, for reasons that had nothing to do with Lucas's paternity. We gave our marriage every chance. And Lucas had 9 years of believing he was growing up in a normal, loving family. And now? I asked. What happens now? That depends partly on you, Kate replied. What are you planning to do with what you know? It was the question I'd been wrestling with since finding the letters. The anger and betrayal made me want to expose everything, to make James and Kate face the consequences of their deception. But the librarian in me knew that stories, once told, couldn't be untold, and Lucas had already experienced enough upheaval. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I won't do anything without considering what's best for Lucas. Kate nodded, seeming relieved. For what it's worth, I've seen how happy he is with you and James. The way you've created a safe space for him during all this change. I'm grateful for that. Her words didn't erase the hurt, but they reminded me that at the center of this mess was a little boy who needed stability and love, not more family drama. When I returned home that evening, James was waiting in the living room, his face anxious. Kate called, he said. She told me you two talked. We did, I confirmed, setting my bag down. She filled in some details, but it doesn't change the fact that you've been lying to me for our entire marriage. I know, James said softly. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that up to you, if you'll let me. I sank into the armchair across from him, suddenly exhausted. I don't know if I can get past this, James. Every time I look at you, I think about all those nights I cried in your arms because we couldn't have a child, while you knew all along that you had a son. It wasn't like that, James insisted, leaning forward. I wasn't thinking of Lucas as my son all these years. Michael is his father, the man who raised him, who taught him to ride a bike and helped with his homework. I was just the biological contributor. I had no right to claim him. But you had an obligation to be honest with your wife, I countered. Yes, James acknowledged. I did, and I failed you in that. Completely. The sincerity in his voice touched something in me, but the wound was still too fresh. I need more time, I said. And space. I'm going to stay with my friend Rachel for a few days. James nodded, tears filling his eyes. What do we tell Lucas? The question brought me back to the most important consideration. We tell him I'm helping. Rachel with some work projects. Nothing changes for him right now. He has enough to deal with. The next few days at Rachel's apartment gave me the distance I needed to think clearly. Rachel knew me well enough not to push for details I wasn't ready to share, simply offering me a guest room and her company when I wanted it. On my third night there, I had a dream about Lucas. In it, he was standing between two houses looking, confused about which door to enter. When he saw me, his face lit up with recognition, and he ran to take my hand. I found my way home, he said in the dream, his voice filled with relief. I woke up with tears on my face, but also with a clarity I hadn't felt since finding the letters. The question wasn't whether I could forgive James, or what should happen with the truth about Lucas's paternity. The question was simpler. What would give Lucas the most love and stability going forward? And suddenly the answer seemed obvious. I drove home that morning and found James in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical movements of someone going through the motions. He looked up in surprise when I entered. "Emily," he breathed, "you're back." "We need to talk," I said, sitting at the counter. "About Lucas, about us, about what happens next." James nodded cautiously. "I'm listening. First, I've decided that we shouldn't tell anyone about Lucas's biological parentage. Not Michael, not Lucas, not anyone. That secret has done enough damage already, and exposing it now would only hurt more people. Relief flickered across James's face. I think that's the right decision. But, I continued, that doesn't mean nothing changes. I spent these past days thinking about what matters most, and it's making sure Lucas has the support and stability he needs during this difficult time. I agree, James said. That's why we agreed to help Michael with the custody arrangement. Yes, I nodded. But I think we can do more. I want to talk to Michael about making this arrangement more permanent, not taking Lucas away from him, but creating a more stable 3-household situation. Lucas would still spend time with Michael when he's not flying and with Kate during her parenting time, but our home would be his primary residence, his constant. James looked stunned. You want us to essentially adopt Lucas? Not legally, I clarified. More like a permanent guardianship arrangement that gives both Michael and Kate the flexibility they need, while giving Lucas the stability he deserves. Michael wouldn't have to give up flying jobs, and Kate wouldn't have to worry about Lucas when she's building her new life in California. And us? James asked quietly. What about our marriage? I took a deep breath. I'm still hurt, James. Deeply. The trust between us is broken, and it's going to take time to rebuild, but I'm willing to try. For Lucas, and for us. This wasn't the family I imagined, but it's the family we have now. James reached across the counter and tentatively took my hand. I don't deserve another chance, but I'm grateful for it. And I promise, no more secrets. Ever. The next step was talking to Michael. We invited him over one evening when Lucas was staying with a friend from his science club. I was nervous about how he would react to our proposal, but we needed to start the conversation. Michael arrived looking tired but smiling. Lucas left his favorite sneakers here, he explained. I told him I'd pick them up. We sat in the living room, and I watched as James struggled to find the words to begin. Michael, I finally said, deciding to take the lead. We wanted to talk to you about Lucas and the current arrangement. Michael's face immediately tensed. Is something wrong? Is it not working for you guys anymore? Just the opposite, I assured him quickly. Lucas is thriving here. We love having him. And that's actually what we wanted to discuss. Over the next half hour, we explained our idea, that Lucas could continue living primarily with us, with Michael and Kate having flexible visitation based on their schedules. We emphasized that we weren't trying to replace either of them as parents, but rather to provide the stable home base that Lucas needed. This way you wouldn't have to give up flying routes or worry about Lucas being alone, James explained. You'd still see him whenever you're home. Maybe even more quality time than you'd have if you were trying to balance full custody with your career. Michael was quiet for a long moment, considering. And you're sure about this? Taking on a kid? Full-time is a huge responsibility. We're sure, I said firmly. We've thought about it from every angle. Lucas needs consistency right now, and we can provide that. Have you talked to Kate about this? Michael asked. Not yet, James replied. We wanted to speak with you first. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his expression thoughtful. I need some time to think about it, and to talk to Lucas, see how he feels. Of course, I agreed. This has to work for everyone, especially Lucas. After Michael left, James and I sat in silence for a while, the weight of what we were proposing finally sinking in. This wasn't a temporary arrangement anymore. This was a life-altering commitment. Are we doing the right thing? James asked softly. I thought about Lucas's face when he mastered a new recipe in the kitchen, the way he carefully arranged his books on the shelf in his room, how he had started calling this place home without seeming to notice. I think we are, I replied. Not because of biology or obligation, but because we genuinely love him and want what's best for him. James nodded, and I saw in his eyes the same mixture of fear and hope that I felt in my heart. The next few weeks brought a flurry of conversations. With Michael, with Kate, over video calls from California, with a family counselor, and most importantly, with Lucas himself. The adults tried to present the arrangement in simple terms. Lucas would live mainly with Uncle James and Aunt Emily, see Dad whenever he was home from flying, and visit Mom in California during school breaks. "So I'm not moving again?" Lucas asked, his voice small but hopeful. "Not unless you want to," I assured him. "This will be your home for as long as you need it to be." "And I can keep my room the same? With my stars on the ceiling and my books?" "Exactly the same," James promised. Lucas thought for a moment, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Does this mean you guys are my parents now, too?" James and I exchanged a look, knowing we were navigating delicate territory. "We're still your aunt and uncle who love you very much," I explained gently. "Your mom and dad are still your parents. We're just extra family who are here for you all the time." Lucas seemed satisfied with that answer, and over time, our unusual family arrangement began to take shape. Michael visited regularly when he wasn't flying, taking Lucas for father-son weekends and remaining deeply involved in his life. Kate called several times a week and welcomed Lucas to California during school breaks, and in our home, life developed new rhythms around Lucas's presence. The spare bedroom became undeniably his, filled with books and science projects and the small treasures that matter to children. James built him a treehouse in the backyard. I started a garden with him, teaching him which plants thrived in which conditions. Our marriage wasn't instantly healed. The betrayal had cut too deep for that. But as we focused on creating a loving home for Lucas, we found new common ground, new reasons to work through the difficult conversations and painful memories. We sought help from a marriage counselor who guided us through the process of rebuilding trust. Some days were harder than others. There were nights I still slept in the guest room when the hurt felt too raw. But there were also moments of unexpected grace. James and Lucas laughing together while building model airplanes, the three of us walking the dogs we still fostered, family movie nights with popcorn battles and too many pillows on the floor. 6 months into our new arrangement, Michael was offered a position as a flight instructor, a job that would keep him grounded in one place and give him more consistent time with Lucas. He moved into an apartment just 20 minutes from our house, and Lucas began spending every other weekend with him. "You know," Michael told me one day when he came to pick up Lucas, "I was worried at first that this arrangement would make me feel like less of a father, but it's actually allowed me to be more present when I am with him." I smiled, relieved that we had found a balance that worked for everyone. "He talks about your weekends together all week long. You're still his hero." Around the same time, I decided to finally pursue my dream of opening a bookshop cafe. With Lucas's enthusiastic support and James's business expertise, I found a charming storefront in the historic district and began the process of turning it into Chapters and Chai, a cozy space where books and community could flourish. Lucas appointed himself my official assistant, offering strong opinions on everything from which children's books to stock to what kind of cookies should be served. "We need good chocolate. Chip cookies," he insisted as we painted the walls together. "Not the kind with weird nuts in them. Kids hate those," I laughed. "Duly noted. No weird nuts." James watched us from the doorway, a smile on his face. "He's got your business sense, Em." The casual comment could have reopened old wounds, the reminder that Lucas shared James's biology. But instead, I found myself touched by the observation. In the months of living together, Lucas had indeed picked up some of my traits, my love of books, my organizational habits, even my tendency to hum while concentrating. Family, I was learning, was created through daily acts of love and presence, not just through blood. The grand opening of Chapters and Chai happened on a crisp fall day, almost exactly a year after Lucas had first come to stay with us. Kate flew in for the occasion, and she, Michael, James, Lucas, and I cut the ribbon together. a visual representation of our unconventional family unit. Later that evening, as we cleaned up after the last customers had left, Lucas tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, setting aside the mug I was washing. "Are you happy that I live with you and Uncle James most of the time? Even though it's a lot of work taking care of me?" I knelt down to meet his eyes. "Lucas, having you in our home is one of the greatest joys of my life. It's not work to take care of someone you love." He nodded thoughtfully. "I found a letter in my backpack today. Mom put it in there before I left California last week. She said she's proud of me for adjusting to all the changes, and that sometimes families look different than we expect, but that doesn't make them less real." "Your mom is very wise," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "I think—" Lucas hesitated, then continued with the simple clarity of children. "I think I have more family now than I did before. Instead of just a mom and dad who fight, I have a mom in California, a dad nearby, and you and Uncle James. That's pretty good, right?" "That's more than pretty good," I assured him, pulling him into a hug. "That's extraordinary." And it was. Our family had been born from mistakes, secrets, and painful truths. It wasn't what any of us had planned or expected. But standing there in my new bookshop with Lucas's arms around my waist and James watching us with a gentle smile, I knew we had created something beautiful out of brokenness. My name is Emily Carson, and if someone asked me now if I ever had dreams of a big family, I'd say yes, and that sometimes dreams come true in ways we never could have imagined. The family I have isn't the one I pictured all those years ago, but it's real and whole and ours. And in the end, that's what matters most. Last week, I was organizing books in the children's section of Chapters in Chai when I found a small package tucked between 2 volumes. It was wrapped in blue paper with a note attached. For Aunt Emily, who showed me that family is something we build together. Lucas. Inside was a handmade picture frame containing a photo of the 5 of us. Me, James, Lucas, Michael, and Kate, taken at Lucas's school science fair. Around the frame, Lucas had glued small pieces of paper with words written on them. Trust, love, forgiveness, growth, family. I traced the words with my finger, tears filling my eyes. Somehow, this child who had come to us in the midst of loss and secrets had understood the most important lesson of all, that family isn't defined by perfect beginnings, but by the courage to keep loving each other through the hard truths and necessary changes. And that, perhaps, is the greatest truth I've learned. That sometimes the letters we find don't just reveal painful secrets from the past. Sometimes they show us the path toward healing and the possibility of a future more whole than we ever dared to imagine.